right? So now I think that we should talk about the ayat. And what ayat with respect to thinking. What do you think you were going to
start whatever.
Yeah, Sheikh, whatever you want to say and about the Qiblah.
Are you going to go the full hour?
No, I think, well, actually, it's not an hour, it's an hour 15.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm having a little bit of problems with your audio. I seem to have lost your audio. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. I'm having a little bit of problems with your audio. I've lost your audio. I've lost your audio. Can you rejoin the link?
The Shia all around it. From any Sheikh you've seen, right?
No, I'm not.
Okay, we're live. Jazakallah khair. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I will. I'm curious, actually. I'm curious to go because I've never been there.
As soon as you forward like that, immediately you see the 9 graves of the
Assalamu alaikum. We're live, yes?
Right-hand side you see.
I would assume the old ones, they did from the new ones.
The new ones are way back in the back.
Volume working, Shaz?
The people who come inside immediately.
Yeah, volume's working fine now. You're good to go.
اوكي بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا عقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان الا على الظالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى اله واصحابه اجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So guys, alhamdulillah, today it's a great honor as always to be joined by Sheikh Walid and by Sheikh Yasser. And what we thought that we would do today, we've obviously been covering Shurut al-Salah, the conditions of the prayer over the last few weeks, and we're specifically in the chapter of the Qiblah. And we obviously spoke about so far it being an obligation, obviously being a condition, the fact that one does not need to face it when one is a musafir and sa'ir, and the different conditions that the Hanabila put on that. And obviously it got kind of deep and it will get deeper as well. But today, of course, when you're in the presence of friends and scholars, then we thought that we would open it up a little bit. So obviously we're here, just so that you guys know, we're here at a gathering, an important gathering, where there's a lot of stuff being discussed, and everyone is very, very busy. So first of all, I'm very grateful for both of my friends to be here, and this is a break session for them as well, and they're giving it up for this, which again, jazakumullah khair. So they're going to just give a few pointers, a few general pointers about the more holistic approach to the Qibla, because obviously there's a legal aspect, but something that we need to understand from a Quranic point of view, also from a real point of view, because it's more than just the rules about how we pray, but a deeper aspect. So I'm going to just hand it over to Sheikh Walid, who will say a few words, and then also I'm going to be live on the portal as well, all right? So that's what makes it easier, so I can respond to the guys there. Obviously, we don't have a live audience for this particular class, but we can still do the kind of the pseudo liveness, inshallah. Fadl Sheikh Walid.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. First of all, I would like to thank you, Sheikh Abu Isa, as well, Sheikh Yasser, giving me the opportunity and the honor to be speaking into your students, and always been the LB, that is blood progression.
He was dead to do that. He was dead. Sheikh Yasser dared him to say that I'm always.
Come on,
Sheikh Yasser.
Mislead, innocent,
dared him to
look
say,
at your smile. You think me? You think me? Seriously?
He dared him to say, I'm happy not to go to LP, but LGBTQ. He said it, okay?
No,
Haram, haram, it's haram.
So anyway, just joking. It's in all serious point. It's always good. You know what's good about this crowd? They are, alhamdulillah. I watch many alhamdulillah of these classes. Me and my family, and as well, get the honor to be with you guys in the masjid, and the spirit of there is a serious element, knowledge and fiqh, but also with a smile and good sense of humor, and and alhamdulillah, that's how it should be. If there's anything I want to say in relation to what Isa was telling me about, if I can make a comment on the verses that came in the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, the second juz, in regard to Al-Qibla. If you look at the first juz in the Quran, there is mainly three stories. The story of Adam and Iblis. Then you have the story of Bani Israel, they've been ordered to basically kill a cow, sacrifice a cow. Then you have the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and him being ordered to sacrifice his son, leave his family in Mecca. And it's interesting that all these stories, is one common factor between these three stories, that they all demonstrate the complete submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the Qiblah comes. The Qiblah comes to also demonstrate the concept of we are ibadullah, we are a slave to Allah. He ordered us to direct ourselves to Jerusalem, we did. Then he said, move to Mecca, we will do. It demonstrates that level of complete submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As in Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, for about 16 or 17 months, he was praying to Jerusalem. Then he was told to move the Qibla, or to basically face Mecca, and that was Salat al-Asr. And when the Sahaba were told, while they praying Asr, that the Qibla was changed, look at the complete obedience. While they're making ruku', they switch and they move towards Mecca praying south towards Mecca because they were in Medina. That shows that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum passed the test, like Ibrahim alayhi salam did. We are the ummah of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and we deserve to follow his basically millah, his way, and we been asked to direct ourselves to the same Qiblah of Ibrahim alayhi salam. As you all know, Al-Arab used to honor Mecca so much, and they used to face Al-Qiblah in their dua and their salah. So it's something that Arab inherited, and it means a lot to them. Mecca means so much to them. So for an Arab man like Muhammad in that community to tell them, leave Mecca, which is the honored the most and the most, they're proud of it the most, and tell them, hey, go to Jerusalem, basically to the Rum and to the Aajim at that time. It's so hard, but when you see the complete obedience of the Sahaba that they will do that, that shows unbelievable level of discipline. And also for me, it means one message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to send to the Ummah from the beginning, that this religion has nothing to do with the race. This religion is free from any ta'asabiyya or being racist to or favoring one race over another. It's not because the Arab love this place or love Kaaba, it has to come first. No, it is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said is. And I hope this is something we reflect upon every time we direct ourselves to the Qibla, that this submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be through all our life. Thank you very much for giving me that.
Sheikh, that's the goal. So that's the reason that we our Sheikh wanted to be first, because he has something to do now. Actually, we should tell everyone online now. You guys know that we launched the online classes, Maghrib online classes. Yasser did, no doubt, after that, and you would have just seen complicated launch as well. Catch it now, but I know that some of you guys who are on LP have taken the class or have signed up for the class, and we're going to be on that in about about an hour and a half, yeah, in about an hour and a half, inshallah, we're going to be on that, myself and Sheikh Walid and Sheikh Yasser and Sheikh Yahya Ibrahim. So guys who are on the complicated portal, almaghrib.online. So www.almaghrib.online. So yeah, so that's that. Some of your own thoughts. Bismillah.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala amma ba'd. I'm going to actually begin from a different tangent altogether, a different perspective. One of the things, we love something called exceptionalism. Exceptionalism means we think we are different from everybody else. And sometimes we're right about that, sometimes we're wrong. The Muslims are this, the Muslims are that. So just for FYI, when we say the Muslims are the greatest at science and whatnot, well, it's not quite exceptionalism. Lots of civilizations we're currently right now, and other civilizations. But one of the things that we are truly exceptional about, one of the things where we are in a completely valid and legitimate manner, proud, meaning Allah has blessed us proud, proud to be exceptional, is that we are the only truly transnational, multi-ethnic faith civilization in the entire globe. I repeat, we are the only truly transnational, multi-ethnic religious society, faithful society in the entire globe. If you look at other faith civilizations, look at Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, they do have, Hindus and Buddhists and Christians from all different backgrounds and ethnicities and skin colors and languages. But the connections that they have amongst themselves cannot be compared to the connections we as the Muslim Ummah have with each other. I mean, truly the Ummah is a global phenomenon. Just to be simplistic in one example, look at the United Nations. The United Nations is composed of 200 plus countries. There's only one religious organization in the entire United Nations, the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference. There is no group of Christian coalition. There is no the Hindus of the globe. Even these secular politicians, even those that have nothing to do with the faith, there's some identity that they have. And I know we can diss the OIC or make fun of it or whatnot, but at the end of the day, there's something in their hearts that says we are one ummah. Now, what has this got to do with AE and logical progression and whatnot, and the topic that you're doing. Very simple, brothers and sisters. You know the slogan that we find in many nation states and many corporations, unity through diversity. Unity through diversity. That slogan, to be brutally honest, is very Orwellian. It means nothing. It's just a fancy term that, okay, everybody's different, no big deal, and we're still all unified. Well, how are you all unified? What makes you all one? If you look at the Muslim Ummah, we are the only civilization where truly unity through diversity is achieved. We're the only civilization that celebrates what needs to be celebrated in terms of variety. Different skin colors, different languages, different ethnicities, different nation states. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions of His miracles and signs is the differences of your languages and skin colors. وَمِنْ آيَاتِ اخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُم. So the very fact that we're all different, it's great. Allah mentions in the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا لِتَعَارَفُوا. We made you different shu'ub is races, and qaba'il is tribes. We made you different races so that you can get to know one another. So we have all of these differences. And yet, and now I get to my point, where it's important, we are unified. We're not unified in our skin colors and languages and ethnicities and racism and cuisine and agriculture and architecture, but where are we unified? Subhanallah, where does one begin? Our religion, our theology, our law, our ethics, our holy book, our rituals, our calendar, and this is where I'm getting straight into the point here now, and our holy direction. You see, this is one of those things that transcends any one place or any one nation, any one ethnicity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has unified all of us in the Qiblah. And this is but one manifestation of obviously many other things that were they need to be important, they are made important. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, and of course all of you have done the verses I'm sure in Surah Al-Baqarah, the beginning of the second juz of the Quran, Allah mentions multiple verses. In fact, 3 or 4 times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَمَنْ حَيْثُ خَرَجْتَ فَوَلِّي وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ وَمَنْ حَيْثُ خَرَجْتُمْ. So whatever you leave from, whichever your direction you're going, wherever direction you face, the command comes فَوَلِّي وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. That phrase at least 3, 4, 5 times in those 2.5 pages. Go read them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands wherever you are, regardless of where you come, regardless of where you're going, فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. Turn your face towards Masjid al-Haram. You see, this is the real unity through diversity. Wherever you are, فَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. Wherever you are, فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. You will find the direction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yet when it comes to salah, when it comes to the one ritual, we all, east or west, north or south, we turn towards one center. And that center, of course, is a religious capital for all Muslims. One of the things that combines all of the ummah, the sanctity, the sacredness of the holy mosque of Mecca. And for those of you that have been there, the symbolism that is present there is simply undescribable. It's something that's patently clear to anybody who goes there. So the Kaaba itself, of course, is shaped like a cube. It used to be shaped like a rectangle that became a square, and then around it we're doing tawaf, circular, and then when the salah time comes, and we've all seen pictures, right? We've all seen pictures. There is a clear symbolic message that is being given, that no matter which direction you are one. That's the point of a circle. And I'm not trying to get a little bit mystical on you or try to find, various, mystical interpretations of this. But there are certain signs. The Quran calls them sha'air Allah, the signs of Allah. And the haram is one of the signs of Allah. It's one of the clear, symbols of Islam. And there is no denying that one of the most obvious symbols is the unity that is manifested in the salah only around the Kaaba, nowhere else. Everywhere else you go, the masjids are straight lines, mashallah, great. But there is one place where regardless of where you are, you're going to actually not be technically, the exact same direction. You're going to form a circle around you, and that is, of course, the Haram, the Kaaba. So the point is that, and this is, again, not a fiqhi topic, I'll leave that to Ustad A.E., but I want to talk about, from, as I said, the point of these last 10 minutes, from a purely civilizational aspect. Islam wasn't just a religion, it was a civilization. From a civilizational aspect, it is truly profound that our religion has given us certain things that transcend any one culture and religion, and through those issues that transcend culture, it has unified cultures. I want you to understand this point. Cultures are different. The way that we live is different. Our languages are different. And Allah did not necessarily tell us to change any of those things as long as the Sharia is maintained. But how then do you form connections between different groups of people? Many ways. And I mentioned some of them. Theology and ethics and laws and rituals. But of the most obvious signs of unity is that the whole Muslim ummah has taken one spiritual capital, and that is Mecca, and they face that direction, and they sanctify that direction, and that's why, of course, as we know, according to some traditions, you shouldn't spit in that direction. According to our common culture, us Indian Pakistanis, we don't put our feet in the direction of the Qiblah. Now, Ustad AE will go into the fiqh issue of that, but at some level, there's an element of truth in that yes, even that direction, which is why even in the books of fiqh, as you know, and I'm sure you've covered this in the class here, the direction itself, you're not supposed to urinate or defecate according to some of the madahib with some tafsir, again, beyond the scope of this class. Point being, with this I conclude, fiqh aside, simply from a civilizational perspective, marvel at the perfection of this religion, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated certain things that will bring about unity and transcend our natural, cultural, linguistic, civilizational differences and still create a bond with people around the globe. And of the most obvious bonds is in fact this topic that you are covering, and that is the Qiblah. And so just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to be united towards the Qiblah, we ask that our hearts remain united in service to Him, in obedience and worship of Him, and in brotherhood to all of you. Jazakumullahu khair once again for allowing me to be a part of.
Slow down.
What?
I'm trying to escape it, but I want to slow down.
I was going to do exactly what my peer and colleague in WB did.
Yes, I know you was. So, okay. So what I want to say, folks, is a couple of things, because I have a couple of questions on my mind. And also, if you have any questions, then you can put them down on the portal right now to ask Sheikh Yasser. I was also thinking, the last 10-minute session that we do, which is the general questions, you can feel free to put those questions up front, meaning that while Sheikh Yasser is here, you can take advantage of asking him from the other. What we'll do now, actually, is that at the end of the session, theoretically, it doesn't always work out, but because we're eating too much chocolate normally. That's the amount of chocolate we're getting through these days. But anyway.
When you say we, this is the royal we, right?
No.
Royal we,
they all know. Like, the amount of chocolate in the audience, audience. This is local. Online, obviously, they can't get through anything.
Okay.
I'm talking about at Gino. Every week, people bring boxes.
Okay. Which chocolate brand, by the way? I'm just curious.
Quality Street, Mikoto, and Roses, and Cadbury.
I'm not going to say much in public.
No, come on. Guys, this is Cadbury's. The person who's living in the country of Hershey's, which is
I don't eat Hershey's.
Yeah, of course. Anyway, so if you have, so what I said is at the end of the class now, we do like a 10-minute of current affairs and modern kind of issues, that are relevant. And the like, for example, you guys, if you were doing this lesson now in Memphis, then the last 10 minutes will be on the baker. All right, but obviously that baker issue is irrelevant, but maybe we can ask a few other questions. So, so guys, if you do have questions, feel free to ask Sheikh Yasser now. There's two questions that were on my mind, I think. The first one was, how would you explain from a student of knowledge point of view, or even a teacher point of view, the sensitivity of trying to explain the change of the Qibla without disrespecting the one? I know you know exactly what I mean. Yeah. If you can explain to them what I mean and how to do it.
So, this sensitivity is a dual in nature. There's a theological element.
First, explain to them what sensitivity actually even is. Because me and you had a discussion, but they're not even aware of it.
Okay. So the sensitivity arises because, well, actually, let me go back then. Okay, obviously we know that the Qibla was towards Jerusalem first. Now it is towards Mecca. Now there's a theological sensitivity and there's a political sensitivity. The theological sensitivity is that the group that obviously sanctifies Jerusalem more than we do, because we sanctify Jerusalem, we consider it to be a blessed city. By the way, footnote here, I'm sure Saad Abris has mentioned this. We do not consider Jerusalem to be a haram. It's not a haram sharif from a legal perspective. This is a mistake and a misnomer. A lot of people say it is Thalithul Haramain. This is a mistake. There are only 2 haramains. Haram, of course, means it's certain Sharia prohibitions apply there. It's not allowed to hunt. It's not allowed to pluck its leaves like in Mecca. So the haram is Mecca and Medina. The Quds, or the area of Jerusalem or Aqsa, is not a haram. It's not. You're allowed to hunt, animals there. You're allowed to pluck leaves there. It is not a haram from a technical perspective, even though the locals call it Haram al-Sharif. It is a blessed land. Subhanallah asra bi'abdi laylan, right? من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله. It is a Mubarak land. It is a blessed land, but it is not a haram. So the theological sensitivity is when we say that the Kaaba is now the main Qiblah, the group that sanctifies Aqsa more than we do, and of course I mean the Bani Israel and the Yahud, they will feel a sense of being slighted. They will feel a sense of, well, hold on a sec, well, that's our holy land, and now you're taking it away. This happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. That type of sensitivity, that type of feeling of pain, like, hold on a sec, that was our holy land. You used to face it, and we felt good. Now you're turning your backs on it and facing towards the Haram in Mecca. So there's that theological sensitivity between 2 religious communities, the Jews and the Muslims. Now in our times, by and large, because the Jews didn't see the early Qibla, they know, and they've been told the Qibla of Muslims is Mecca. So that's a little bit, gone in our times by and large. But the other issue is the political sensitivity. And of course, the political sensitivity, especially right now, today, when the president of this land has announced that Jerusalem is now the political capital of that state, obviously now it becomes even more sensitive from a political nature, because we believe that city is blessed. Unfortunately, some Muslims, in their anger towards the political problems of that region, might forget that, look, the people, the Muslims and the land is sacred and blessed. And we need to phrase it in a manner that the sanctity of the city remains, despite the political controversies and the intrigues going on. So we have to be careful that we don't, astaghfirullah, disrespect, even unintentionally, because no Muslim would intentionally disrespect Aqsa. But we will have to be careful we don't somehow disrespect. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jal praises Aqsa multiple times. إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا بَارَكْنَا حَوْلَهُ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الْمُقَدَّسَةِ. How many different phrases Allah Azza wa Jal has used for the holy lands, the blessed lands, the sacred lands. And it is indeed a blessed and sacred lands that hundreds of prophets have walked. But we simply believe that Mecca is more sacred and more blessed and more holy. It's a degree of sensitivity. Simple thing that I'll hand it back to Ustad Abu Isa, and that is the famous hadith in Sahih Bukhari, where a Muslim Sahabi and a Jew of Medina began fighting over an economic issue, over a religion, over a debt. And then the Jewish person said, I swear by the one who has chosen Musa over everybody in the whole world. This irritated the Muslim. He said, I swear by the one who has chosen Muhammad over everybody in the whole world. Then each one felt the other is indirectly disrespecting the Prophet. So they entered into a physical fight until they were brought in front of the Prophet ﷺ. And he said, hadith is in Sahih Bukhari, لا تفضلوني على موسى ibn Imran. Don't say that I'm better than Musa ibn Imran. Pause your footnote. Theologically, the Prophet ﷺ is better. But when it is done in a manner that you're disrespecting other prophets, then we don't do it. When he is better, but the other is also good and blessed. But when you try to say, oh, he is better, intending to disrespect the other, it becomes completely haram. And the context that it occurred, that was the point that was being attempted. And that is why the Prophet said, don't do that. And then the hadith goes on. Point is, just like Musa and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, both of them are blessed and sacred. And yes, between the two, there is one more holy than the other. If we try to praise one in order to implicitly denigrate the other, it's not allowed. Similarly, Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem are the 3 blessed cities, not the 3 harams, right? Again, I hope you understand. Haram is a technical fiqhi term. Blessed city is a theological term, or it's Allah Azza wa Jal blesses. And the three cities are blessed, or the three locations, I should say. And in fact, to be honest, I would even say the cities are blessed. I don't have a problem saying the cities themselves are blessed, because Allah mentions in the Quran, Barakna hawlahu. Right? So it's the whole area. It's not just the haram compound that is blessed. And this is again a theological issue, but that area around it is blessed as well. So we have to be careful as we praise Mecca that, astaghfirullah, there's no denigration indirectly insinuated of the other city. And that's why we're talking about the sensitivities of how we phrase these types.
What do you think about the person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was saying about the Prophet that that's what he wanted, tardaha, that's what you desired?
So exactly.
Why did he desire it? I asked you the question, I asked it off air, whether there was any riwayah in the seerah that would suggest that when the Prophet ﷺ went to Medina, because I did mention, I think, Shaz, I mentioned in last week or the week before, I said that can you imagine not the goading of the Jews there, but that uncomfortable kind of feeling that, we're the new religion, we're the new guys on the block, and yet, these guys will probably be laughing, maybe, and saying, well, you're still praying towards our kind of side. What would you reckon about that whole discussion?
Exactly. There's psychological issues as well that we need to go back to from the beginning of the seerah. Now, I'm sure, again, you have studied that in Mecca, our Prophet ﷺ would always pray using the Kaaba essentially as a sutra. And even though the Qiblah was Jerusalem, he loved the Kaaba so much that he would always pray on that one side of the Kaaba that was the opposite of Jerusalem, such that he's facing it so that Jerusalem is then behind it. And so it's a double shot, right? Like you kill two birds with one stone, as the saying goes. It's a double shot. So he would always have the ta'zeem, or the sanctity and the great status of the Kaaba was always in his heart. And that is why he would always be praying in that one direction. Now, as you all know from basic geography, when you go to Medina, and Medina is due north, it is literally exact north from Mecca. Okay, when you go to Medina, Jerusalem is due north from Medina. So you cannot kill two birds with one stone. You cannot do both. And when you turn to Jerusalem, which is due north, then the Kaaba is due south. So your back is therefore to the south. So your back will be pointing towards the Kaaba. And that is why in that year and something before the verse came down, in that year and something before the verse came down in Surah Baqarah, for that year or so, our Prophet ﷺ felt perturbed because he's turning his back to, now here's the beauty, Allah Azza wa Jal had not up until this point in time revealed anything that shows that Mecca is more sacred or less sacred than Jerusalem. It was neutral, right? And when the first salah came down, then Jibreel, as you know, the riwayah, tells us, Jibreel came down most likely within the first month after Ya Ayyuhal Muddathir, and taught him how to do wudu, and taught him how to pray, and included in that would have been obviously the arkan of salah and how to face the Qiblah and whatnot, and the Qiblah would have been Jerusalem. So this commandment is implied in the actions of Jibreel. There's no Quran that has come down that has commanded him to face Jerusalem. This command to face Jerusalem is simply Jibreel alayhi salam teaching the Prophet how to pray, and he would have told him in that you're going to face the direction of Masjid al-Aqsa. So the command therefore is not Quranic, it's from Jibreel, from Allah Azza wa Jal. When he goes to Medina, obviously the tensions develop. Of course, it is mentioned in the Quran that the Bani Israel would be boasting to the pagans, to the mushrikun of Medina. The Bani Israel will be boasting that we're waiting for the Prophet to come. And he's going to come and we're going to be the ones victorious. We're going to be the ones. So there's already this sense of we're better than the pagans around us. When the Prophet ﷺ came, initially, of course, he was hopeful that the Yahud and the Nasara, of course, the Nasara did not come in until later on, but the Bani Israel would accept his message because it's a direct continuation. It's a direct link. Theologically speaking, of course, the Ahl Kitab are much closer to us than the Mushrikun. Theologically speaking, the Ahl Kitab already believe in one God. They're already praying, fasting. There's some Sharia with them. So it's much closer. So initially, our Prophet felt an attachment to them. Hadith is also in Sahih Bukhari, that when he came, he even picked up certain customs of Ahl Kitab, including how to part his hair. He began following them with the intention that, you know what, let me show them that I am close to them, right? And there was some hope. Abdullah bin Salam converted, others converted. But as we all know from the seerah, once they realized that the prophet they were waiting for was not from amongst them, but rather from amongst the Arabs, right? So when they recognized them, كَفَرُوا بِهِ, as the Quran says, right? فَلَمَّا عَرَفُوا, when they recognized who he was, right? يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُم. They recognized him as well as they recognized their own children. Pause here, footnote. I never truly understood this ayah until I had children of my own. I memorized the Quran as a teenager. I never understood this ayah until I had my own children. One day I was leading the salah, and my Ammar, who is now, mashallah, in college, so you can see how old I am, was with my wife, his mother, and he began crying in the back of the masjid. And subhanallah, my heart just stopped, like my son's crying. And then I realized I recognized his cry out of all of the babies there. I recognized his cry. And I thought of the ayah, يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُم. Because, babies cry all the time. But then when Ammar's cry came, I thought I had shortened the salah more than any other kid. And subhanAllah, it hit me. So you recognize the back of the hair of your son or your daughter. You recognize, like, يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُم. The cry of the baby was recognized by me. And there was no doubt that this is Ammar crying. Even though, there's lots of babies that cry or not. And that's when it hit me. Allah's clear statement. يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُم. Anyway, back to the story here. So when the Bani Israel rejected the Prophet ﷺ, and it became clear around a year or so that the rejection would be a permanent one, as we know, at that point in time, the Qiblah took on a political significance as well as a theological one. Because our Prophet ﷺ, indeed, he's a continuation of the previous prophets, but at the end of the day, he is more than just a prophet to that one nation. And that is why the command to change the Qiblah, when it came down, wasn't just theological. There was an implied political message. And the political message is very beautiful, because the Kaaba is not disconnected from Masjid al-Aqsa. The Kaaba is not disconnected, because the one who founded Masjid al-Aqsa, according to most riwayats, it's Ya'qub alayhi salam. Some say Ishaq, and Allah knows best, but most likely it was Ya'qub who first made an area to pray in, right? Who is Ya'qub other than the grandson of the one who made the Kaaba? And so when the command comes down to face the Kaaba, in fact, the Yahud theoretically should not have been insulted at all. Because rather than going to the grandson's first structure of the house, because as the hadith says, when the Prophet was asked, what was the first mosque built? And the Quran tells us, أول بيت, he said, the Kaaba. They said, what was the second mosque? He said, Bayt al-Maqdis, so Bayt al-Masjid al-Aqsa. What was between them? 40 years, right? So one generation. 40 years means around a generation. One generation took place between the Kaaba and between Masjid al-Aqsa or Bayt al-Muqaddas, whatever you want to call it. So when the Yahud are told actually the original Kaaba and the Qibla is Mecca, is the Kaaba, theoretically, theologically, technically, they should have said, okay, that makes sense. Ibrahim is our father and he's your father, and we're going back to the origin. But of course, as you know, that's not the way they feel. And for them, the grandson, theoretically, or not theoretically, realistically now. Theoretically, of course, Abraham is Abraham. Realistically, the grandson occupies a higher role. That's why they call themselves Bani Israel. And so they did feel a sting at that point in time. And that's when also the Prophet discarded any things that he had adopted from them. As Aisha says, he initially would part his hair the way that they did. Then he stopped doing it and he returned to his original way. So all of these minor things he might have adopted during this interim time, when the command came down to change the Qibla, all of that was discarded, because the message is clear now that, look, I'm a part of you, and yet I'm more than you. I'm a continuation of where you're coming from, and yet I am more than that. I'm going back to the origin. I'm going back to the beginning. And so he essentially brings them in, but then when they themselves reject, he then rises up, and they should have risen up with him, but they didn't do that. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jalla says, we're going to make this a test and a trial for the people of Medina, as it was the case. I went way beyond what you need to read.
I was going to say to you is Masjid al-Aqsa, just because obviously you've been there recently, you're happy with the idea that it's the entire complex and not the not what they call Masjid al-Qibli only?
Who says it's Masjid al-Qibli? No academic says it's Masjid al-Qibli. Masjid al-Qibli.
Explain to them what that means.
So, a lot of people who have never been to Aqsa, they are very clueless about the way that the whole compound works. The compound itself is a massive, how many, 40 hectares? It's a huge area. It's like a mini city. It'll take you like 15, not a mini city, but it'll take you 15 minutes really to walk from one side to the other at a fast pace. It's a very massive, flat area. And within it, there are over 20 small masajid, the most prominent one being basically the Dome of the Rock, the famous golden structure that you see. That Dome of the Rock is but one masjid on the whole compound, the whole plain over there. And the Dome of the Rock, of course, it was built by the Umayyad Khalifa based upon, of course, the legend, and it's a legend, that the Prophet ﷺ performed Isra from that very mountaintop. We don't know whether it was that mountaintop. That is what is said. Allah knows best. But most likely it was from that area for sure. Of course, we have for sure it was from the area. Whether it was the mountaintop or not, Allah knows best. Now, in front of that Dome of the Rock, towards the Qiblah, there is the original masjid that was built by Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala. By original, I don't mean the bricks are the same. I mean the location is the same, obviously. So the original location that Umar ibn Khattab, when he conquered Jerusalem in his second year of the Khilafah, you all know the famous story that he came riding on his donkey and they were taking turns and he entered the city, etc., got the keys. Then when he finally entered the compound, and the compound had been converted to a dumpster, a dump yard, najis everywhere filled. Why? Because the Christians wanted to disrespect the Yahud and their standard anti-Semitism throughout the histories. So the Christians had converted the holiest of holy Jewish places into a dumpster. And Umar ibn Khattab, he cleaned it up and he built a masjid in the southernmost part of the compound, which is southernmost because it's facing Mecca, right? So the southernmost, he built the masjid over there. Now, that masjid was built on the southernmost location simply because logistically that's the closest to the Qiblah. And also there was another reason they say, and that is that by doing that, the Yahud considered the Dome of the Rock, that rock over there, they consider that rock to be the holiest of holy places within that temple area. And Umar ibn Khattab did not think that the rock was any more significant or less than the rest of the area. So he wanted to make the Qiblah such that when you're facing Mecca, the rock will then be behind you. Right? It is said that some of the Jewish converts to Islam suggested to build the masjid behind the rock.
It is said, right? The riwayat are not authentic as far as you're concerned?
The
riwayat of Ka'ab.
No, the riwayat of Ka'ab is authentic.
Okay.
The riwayat of Ka'ab is authentic.
So, I just want to know why he said it is said. There are some to love it, yeah. They would question that.
I see what you're saying here. Okay. As far as I know, the riwayat are authentic.
Okay.
But one wonders about other things about this issue.
Right.
How,
Right.
So was it really his Yahudiya that did that?
Right.
Or was it Umar's assumption?
Right.
Allah knows.
Right.
It's not something clear from the riwayat.
Can you just explain that to the folks what I'm saying?
Okay, so there was a famous tabi'i, he's not a sahabi. There's a famous tabi'i who was a rabbi who converted to Islam, or his father was a rabbi who converted to Islam. And so he was very knowledgeable of the Jewish tradition and whatnot. And he was with Umar ibn Khattab, and now he is a famous scholar of tafsir. His name is Ka'b. When Umar ibn Khattab got suggestions, where should we build the masjid? What is now Masjid al-Qibli. By the way, Masjid al-Qibli, i.e. the Masjid of the Qibla. Qibli, the Masjid of the Qibla. So Masjid al-Qibli means towards the Qibla, because it's in the direction of the Qibla. Meaning, it is the most southern part, the closest to the Qibla of the Kaaba. So Ka'b allegedly said, by allegedly again, we don't know the reason. Ka'b said, why don't you build it behind the temple? Behind the mountain. There's a hill, as you know. Why don't you build behind the mountain? And Umar al-Khattab got irritated at Ka'b. And he says, your Yahudiya is coming out. Right? Rather, I'm going to build it in front so that the back is then facing.
We don't want to give you two birds with one stone.
Yes, exactly. We don't want to give the two birds with one stone thing like the Prophet. We don't want to do that. So then he built it.
Pure facing.
Yes, pure facing it. Yeah. And so he then built it in that direction. Now, what is the sacred land here is the point. And by the way, I'm sure Ustad Abu Isa has done this. The same controversy exists for Mecca. What is blessed? Where is the thawab 100,000 times? Is it only the masjid of the haram in Mecca, or is it the entire city of Mecca? And I don't know Ustad Abu Isa's position, but all of you are mature enough to know ikhtilaf is part of our tradition. I personally believe the entire city is blessed, and it's not just
Saudi ulama generally opinion, right?
no, within the Saudi ulama you have both positions.
No, but
within
the
Hanbali, yes.
For the record, mine is the masjid, Sheikh Hilan is the masjid, but the majority, I think, go with the city.
Most of the go with the city.
Yeah.
So the entire city. Now, by the way, of course, praying in the masjid, you will get the rewards of the great jama'ah. But anywhere in the city of Mecca, the old city of Mecca that is demarcated by the Prophet, not the modern city of Mecca, which is a massive mega complex, the old city of Mecca, in the fiqh position of classical ulama, I would say the majority, and this is my position as well, the city is blessed for the 100,000. And the same goes for Masjid al-Aqsa, because again, al-ard al-muqaddasa, it's the whole land is sacred over there. And إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا بَارَكْنَا حَوْلَهُ. All of this is mentioned in the Quran. So the notion that the barakah is pinpointed to a 10 by 10, or even a 50 by 50, Allah knows best. And there are positions like this, that the masjid itself only is blessed. So I spoke with one of the ulama and academics, Dr. Mustafa Abu Suwair, I'm mentioning his name. He is the chair of Islamic Studies inside Masjid al-Aqsa. He teaches halaqah, and he has a PhD from America, speaks fluent English and whatnot. I had a long conversation with him last time I went, and he said that even this complex, the demarcations of it go back to Roman times. So the claim that Muslims think that it is only the complex that is sacred, it is the Romans, Herod and whatnot, the King Herod, Emperor Herod, who basically demarcated that particular area and then handed it over, to the Jewish people and whatnot. That demarcation does not go back to the time of Suleiman.
And when you say demarcation, I think you mean like structural, as because we would say it's the whole area. We would say the complex means the whole area. What you're saying is that what you see from the whole area is a very structural kind of.
Obviously, because there is a flat land, which is rather massive, in which there is no buying and selling, and there's no people living there. The whole land, the whole flat area is like a massive haram complex. That's what it's called, a haram complex. Right outside the haram complex, there are people living. There are, the Palestinian people, the hotels there, buying and selling. You've got your baqalas, your grocery sellers, whatnot, right outside the complex. Now, the question arises, what is blessed? And I would say the city is blessed. And the thawab or the blessings go to the city. Nobody's denying that the center of the city, even Mecca, the Kaaba, is more blessed. But the whole area is blessed. It is Ard al-Muqaddas. It is a sacred land and not a sacred, pinpoint. And Allah knows best. So the point, but however, the claim that only Masjid Qibali, no. Because Masjid Qibali, who built it? Umar al-Khattab. And the current Masjid al-Qibali was actually expanded by the Umayyads, then expanded by Salahuddin Ayyubi. So when you enter the current Masjid al-Qibali, by the way, it's very interesting, you find the original mihrab of Salahuddin Ayyubi. Pause here, footnote, 1965, a fanatic Israeli burnt down, this is 60-something, 67 as I forgot the date, but in one generation ago, he burnt down the original mihrab. So one of the businessmen in the Khalij, he paid like $1.5 million to model. However, in the masjid in Hebron, in Beit Khalil, Salahuddin Ayyubi built 2 mihrabs, exact same. And he gifted one to Masjid al-Aqsa, and he gifted the other to Beit Khalil. It's called the Hebron, and the famous city of Hebron. And that one, the original, is still standing exactly to this day. When you enter Masjid al-Qibali, you will read the original script of Salahuddin Ayyubi's time, that in the year, 571 Hijrah, Al-Malik al-Mu'azzam al-Mudhaffar Salahuddin al-Ayyubi conquered Jerusalem from the Nasara. This is still written over there. Actually, for those of you who followed me on Snapchat or on Facebook when I went, and I'm going again inshallah in 3 weeks, I'm able to go in after all this happened. But those of you that are following me, you saw I actually videotaped that calligraphy that is from the time of Salah ad-Din. The date of conquest is mentioned. So point is, who gets to decide that only that masjid is sacred? This is an ijtihadi thing that Umar built a smaller masjid, the Umayyads, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan built a larger one, and then Mamluks built a larger one, Salah al-Ayyubi. So these are human expansions. The claim that only that human expansion is blessed, and the same goes for the Kaaba. So the Haram was blessed in Ottoman and the Mamluk times when it was much smaller. Then when it gets bigger, the Saudi expansion, the largest in the world, all of a sudden that area outside that wasn't sacred becomes sacred. I understand some people believe that, fine, that's their ijtihad. But the ijtihad of the majority, the fiqh position of the majority, the sanctity is to the ancient city of Mecca, which is clearly demarcated. That's why Masjid Aisha is outside the ancient city. That city of Mecca is a blessed city, as the Prophet said, you are the most beloved of cities to me, right? Habbul bilad, the blessed lands to me. So Allah knows best. The position that I hold, the entire area is blessed. And of course, the Haram complex obviously is the pinpoint of it and is the center of it, but the entire area is blessed of Allah.
So just back onto the Masjid al-Qiblah. In your opinion, what do you think the Prophet ﷺ was praying to out of all of that?
What was he praying to?
I mean, that also supports the idea of Al-Ba'id, as we're going to cover.
Yeah.
Whoever's far, you guys will know, obviously, as part of the text which is coming up, we started at the beginning, right? If you're in front of the Kaaba, you pray directly towards it, meaning intrinsically. But when you are further away, then towards its direction, as we're going to see. So you can probably just say the direction, and that's it.
There is no evidence, there is nothing in the riwayat which direction the Prophet faced when he was there. Because obviously, when he was there, this was in mid-Mecca or end of Mecca, 2 opinions when Isra took place. And in either of those opinions, the ayat al-Baqarah had not yet come down. So when he's in Masjid al-Aqsa, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then the Qibla is Masjid al-Aqsa. Therefore, I have read books that mention because the Qibla, at the Qibla is anywhere, i.e. when you're inside the Kaaba, you can pray anywhere because you're inside the Kaaba. So we assume he would have faced Mecca because he's allowed to face anywhere once he's at the original Qibla. But this is an assumption, I have to be honest here. I love it, my heart loves it, my mind loves it, but academically, there's no explicit evidence about this.
Yeah,
it's an assumption.
Yeah, we're going to come to that issue about what happens. Is it possible to pray inside the Kaaba for that reason? And from a Qibla point of view, the Hanabil have an interesting opinion on that. What do you think about...
so you're not going to let me go, are you?
No, of course not. All the way. Shaz, also I need to know how long this is going for because I don't have the recorded...
4:15.
So, okay, so we've done quite a bit. So we're going to be wrapping up soon. To carry on with the
emotional hijacking, brother. She told me after you're done, you can go now live Q&A.
After you're done. You're not done yet, bro. If the city of Al-Aqsa is likewise, your discussion was about Mecca and the city. If we're going to say Masjid al-Aqsa or Masjid al-Qibli, that the wider area is holy, what do you want to say about the city itself? And if that city is indeed sanctified, not a haram, but sanctified, the Jerusalem announcement today, what's your opinion on that? How does that change?
So, firstly, when it comes to the original city, we do not have the demarcations in our Sharia. And I asked this to the professor over there, and he said, of course, there are. The Israeli government obviously has a department of antiquities and archaeology and whatnot, and of course they're doing an amazing job from their perspective, because from their perspective that is their holy city. So obviously they have a whole ton of things they've dug up, and there are museums over there. If you ever go there, it's just very interesting what they have done. And then there are theories, there are plenty of maps, and I've seen some myself about the original city at the time of Sulaiman. But these are these are ijtihadi issues. They're very interested in it, probably obviously more than we are, because from their perspective this was. So there's plenty of information that they've derived from contemporary sources, later sources, and they have their theories about the grounds of the city. For our perspective, we don't know. Where does the city end? That's why, for example, the Haram is so good, because for sure it is within the city center.
Yeah.
That's why.
Political then?
The issue of the announcement, obviously, our heart, the whole Ummah's heart is hurt.
Why though? Why? Because we still see it as holy. They still see it as holy. Explain
So,
in your opinion, what's the
Muslims
ramification?
need to understand recent history, right? The whole issue of how this land was carved up. Go back to the Balfour Declaration, even before that, go back to the beginnings of Zionism, right? The making of the modern world.
The making of the modern world.
1914. Just look it up. So go back to the whole creation of the modern Middle East, right? The rise of what is called Zionism in Europe, in Eastern Europe, the Balfour Declaration of World War I, the granting of the Palestinian area to the British, called the British Mandate. The British Mandate then basically pre-World War II essentially decided to hand it over to the modern country of Israel to be created. And so Israel was created basically, 1947, 1948. Israel was created. Now, the whole issue, of course, from our perspective, we are wondering about the legality. Who gives whom the right to hand land over? Why would the British have right to have this land over? But see, here's the point. Even for those who say the United Nations agreed or the League of Nations agreed, for those people who are not religious, they're the people who say that the United Nations and League of Nations have the right, we say to them, according to that agreement, Jerusalem was supposed to be neutral. Jerusalem was supposed to be neither this nor that. It was supposed to be a spiritual capital, free from politics. Nobody should take control over it. But in the Israeli War of 1967, Israel, of course, conquered Gaza, conquered the Sinai Peninsula at that point in time, and they conquered Jerusalem as well. So they invaded Jerusalem. Jerusalem was supposed to be neutral, off limits. They were not given Jerusalem. They invaded it, and they illegally occupied it, and then all of this, fitna or mess began. So we have 2 points. Number one, from a purely religious perspective, we question the entire enterprise. And we say, what gives the United Nations or the League of Nations the right? What gives Mr. Balfour the right to declare? What gives what? So that's one tangent that we go down. And we should be understanding of our history, cognizant, because obviously the net result is nobody, from their perspective, nobody has this right the same way that America was created from the Indians and whatnot. So they'll give you a million examples. And unless you have a religious text, really, might and right go hand in hand. You understand what I'm saying? At the end of the day, everybody invades every land and takes it over. So unless you have a religious text, and only 2 groups have religious texts, us Muslims and the Jews, and both of those religious texts essentially contradict one another. So from a purely pragmatic political perspective, the other side is going to say, maybe some evils were done, but might makes right, so tough luck. Everybody did it, we did it as well. So then we say, even if you believe in this, سَلَّمْنَا جَدَلًا, as they say, and again, please don't misunderstand me. I'm saying in an argument, sometimes you might concede something you don't actually agree with. Even if we concede, okay, the United Nations, the League of Nations did what they did, clearly, in 1967, you overstepped the bounds that were, according to your paradigm. Again, please don't misquote me because they're very sensitive. I'm not saying we agree with that, but I'm saying according to your evidence, you say the League of Nations gave us that right, and they are the highest authority in this world. We say, even if you believe this, the League of Nations, or the United Nations, which now became the League of Nations, by the way, became the United Nations. This is 1940s. There was no, when the Palestinian Mandate was created, it was the League of Nations, right? So the League of Nations gave us that right. We respond, the right that was given to you, according to your own documents, explicitly said Jerusalem should remain politically neutral. And you, in 1967, as everybody knows, literally invaded your own, land, as you say, and you obviously kicked the Palestinians out, the second intifada, the first intifada, and you overtook Masjid al-Aqsa by force. And tanks came in, guns were used, people were killed, and by force, you then occupied this land. And that is why, to this day, when you go, you will literally have to go through Israeli checkpoints to enter Masjid al-Aqsa. So right outside Masjid al-Aqsa, all of the Israeli checkpoints are there. And when you walk in, barbed wire, armed guns, everything, it's literally under occupation. And of course, they say they're protecting it against fanatical, Jews and fanatical Muslims. But obviously, you and I both know who gets interrogated, who gets pulled aside, who gets questioned, and who gets killed when something happens. So we know this is the reality that goes on here. So the fact that now the President of the United States is saying, oh, Jerusalem is the capital, see, that's the whole point. This is meant to acquiesce to the demands of that country that Jerusalem belongs to us. And that's why all other countries in the world were hesitant to agree to this, because they know basic history. They know Jerusalem was never meant to be given to this country. It was meant to be independent. They know that this city was occupied and conquered by military force, and they're hesitant because they understand that's not fair, that's not right. Even if you agree to the United Nations, that is simply not right. Now, our current president, as you know, has his own agenda, and Allah musta'an, what can we do other than complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Any practical steps? Some of the people are asking here, how do we support our brothers and sisters? What should we don't say we shouldn't become inflamed. What's the best reaction?
So honestly, from a political level, that's not my forte, and rahimallah, I'm not a politician, alhamdulillah, I'm not a politician. I despise politicians by and large, and I hate politics as a thing to get involved with. So I'm not the person to ask politically what can be done. However, let me go into a personal issue here. For the longest time, I personally did not want to go to Palestine and Masjid al-Aqsa, because I felt that it would be very difficult for me emotionally. And I also somewhat sympathize with the hardcore fatwa that it's haram to go because you're supporting the occupiers, okay? After much discussion and istikhara, 3 years ago, I took my first group there. That journey completely gave me a 180. The first point I was right in. You will never in your life feel as emotionally tortured and yet on a mystical spiritual high as you will over there. You will just the ups and downs within the span of a few minutes, the pain and the joy, the sanctity and just the stabbings that you see in your heart. I can't even, words cannot describe. But then here's the point. SubhanAllah, everywhere we went, what really hit me was the emptiness of that sacred land. I was there during Christmas break. And Christmas break, I typically would take, Christmas is the time when everybody in the Western world is off, right? Much of the Eastern world. Mecca and Medina during that week of December are packed to capacity because of logistics. Everyone wants to go to Umrah at that time. I was there on the 25th, 26th, 27th. Salat al-Dhuhr, Asr, not even two sufuf. Dead empty. And I'm feeling, what is going on here? And I spoke to my Palestinian guys, and they said they want this place to be abandoned. They, meaning the offer, they want it to be abandoned so that they can then make a case. This huge land in prime territory is not being used. By the way, look at you need to do that.
No, I think this one.
It's not.
Just lost the picture.
Huh?
We just lost the picture.
Oh, right, 1 second, Shazad. Oh. Is it back, Shaz?
Yeah, it's back here.
Right, okay, yeah.
Okay, so I spoke to many Palestinian brothers and sisters, and to a person, every one of them said, so much so I recorded one of them on video and I posted it. Every one of them said, go tell the Muslims of the Western world we need you here. How can you help us out? Our hotels are empty because those guys don't come. You guys, if you don't come, who's going to help us? Our shops, our tourism companies, nobody helps us economically. Nobody other than you guys. Because if you don't come, as most of you should be aware, most Muslim countries do not allow visiting that land. It's not allowed from their political perspective. Only a few countries, us Americans, you Britishers, Canadians, Australians, our passports allow us to go into that land. And we don't face a backlash from our countries from doing that. There's no guarantee we're going to get it. As you know, they can stop Muslims and whatnot. But overall, if you're respectful and dignified and you go prepared to wait at the airport for 5 hours and be humiliated and checked and whatnot, then I would say it's worth the effort. And the Palestinian brothers and sisters. So you want to help the Muslims of that region? Then after you've done your Hajj and you've done your Umrah, then you should, as per Sunnah, visit the third holy site. And make it your niyyah. I'm going to go there to help the people financially who deserve to be helped. Which means, I'm just being honest with you, You're going to have to sacrifice 5-star hotels because you're not allowed to have a 5-star hotel if you're of a particular background. You get my point? Even I have to be a bit vague here. You have to sacrifice the best tourist companies and go for the second-class tourist companies, right? You understand what I'm saying here, that you're going to have to do all of that. We stay in 3-star hotels because that's the highest they're allowed over there. The highest that you can get is a 3-star. We stay in a 3-star hotel. We hire the companies that deal with our brothers and sisters. We hire the tour guides that are from our brothers and sisters, and we help them economically. And we go to stores of the region, and we offer them, and we just to be there. So many people, and our buses are surrounded by Palestinian kids over there. They're so happy to see us waving the flag, saying, "Where are you from?" America, America. They get so happy they see it. That's what you can do. At some basic level, other than dua, you get your iman boosted. And along with the boost, it's going to be a pain. It's going to be, but guess what? Going there will make you more confident to speak about it. And you can speak to your colleagues, your neighbors, your friends. You can see with your eyes. You can say, I saw with my own eyes. To read about it is one thing, to see it, right? As the hadith says, the one who hears is not the one who sees, okay? So to go there yourself and to see the state of occupation in front of your eyes and to see how they treat people of different backgrounds, the clear double standards. It's painful, but it is worth it for many reasons. And of them is that you are better prepared to engage in dialogue with people who don't know any better and think that, oh, it's peaceful in that region and whatnot. You go and you tell them the reality. I think that's one of the most practical ways where you can benefit the locals and also increase your own iman, because obviously at the end of the day, I mean, you know, iman aside, to see the original mihrab of Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, man, and the city of Jerusalem, it is the most beautiful city in the world. It is the original architecture from the time of Sulaiman al-Qanuni, from the time of the Mamluks. I mean, you have history galore over there. Everything is as it is. From my perspective, when you walk into Jerusalem, you are being magically transported 1,000 years in the past. The cobbled paths, the old houses, the original structures, it's as if Allah has blessed you to see how people used to live 1,000 years ago. 800 years ago, and just the ambience, the people that are dressing there. You have the Orthodox Christians, you have the the Jews of all different backgrounds, the Muslim, and you see a little microcosm of medieval Christianity, Judaism, and the Muslim lands, and it's just, I mean, subhanAllah. Of course, that's the Muslim side. You can go to the Christian side, see the original church that Umar ibn al-Khattab visited, and the minister or the pastor said to him, "Pray inside." He goes, "No, if I pray inside, they're going to destroy the church because I prayed there." So he walked away and he prayed, outside the church. That place is now called Masjid Umar. And you can actually go to Masjid Umar right in front of the Church of Nativity, where they say Jesus was born. That's the holiest church of Christianity. Literally feet away from it is Masjid Umar. Why? Because he's absolutely right. When the Muslims came in, eventually they conquered that area, they took over that land, and they made a masjid where Umar prayed, not in the Church of Nativity. So to go pray in Masjid Umar and to go through that history, I mean, it's really just, words fail me, and words really fail me. Words fail me just to tell you the emotions you feel, the connection of the past. And it's just, subhanAllah, I think it's for those who financially can afford it and politically have the correct passports, I firmly believe it is one of the ways you can support your Palestinian brothers and sisters.
Right, okay, we're gonna wrap it up. Just always asking about Adam alayhi salam. Was it not him that built the Kaaba? What's your call on that?
There are no authentic riwayats about Adam alayhi salam building the Kaaba. There are weak, fabricated narrations without asanid narrations. There's nothing authentic. And the Quran explicitly says that the Haram is awwalu baytin wudi'a lin-nas, and the Haram was built by Ibrahim alayhi salam. So my personal opinion, and I know it's found in certain books, and these riwayat are found in Mustadrak al-Hakim and others, but there's nothing authentic, and then it contradicts what is known through tawatur and authenticity, and that is that the Haram in Mecca, built by Ibrahim, is the first sacred area built to worship Allah.
Are the Zionists actually digging in Jerusalem in order to find either the Book of Suleiman or the foundation of Suleiman or the second temple of Suleiman?
They see that? I haven't seen it, but the professor told me that they are digging in areas that they believe is not sacred. Because obviously, according to their Sharia, they have areas that are sacred that they're not allowed to touch. So there's lots of excavations going on in areas of Jerusalem. Also, what the guides told me that a lot of times when people do reconstruction of their houses, these days they have to dig deeper to build deeper foundations, right? So they will come across something from ancient times. And there's laws in Israel that when you discover them, you stop construction, you call the government, they take over and they do whatever they need to. So based on that, a lot of archaeological surveying has been done in the houses around the complex, because that city has been there for 4,000 years. So I am not an expert about where they can or they cannot dig or whatnot, but all I do know is they have more of a vested interest than we do to excavate.
What do you think they're looking for mostly? According to the
they want to know the exact location of the Haykal, it's called, or the temple of Suleiman. They want to know that because the current structure wasn't built by Suleiman. The current Wailing Wall is the remnants of King Herod's reconstruction. And they know that. They know that. So King Herod was a Roman emperor who basically, gifted them. So they had a love-hate relationship, the Roman Empire and the Jews. Sometimes they loved, sometimes they hated them. King Herod and others, they gifted them, a complex that, okay, well, after a previous one had destroyed it, then Herod comes along and builds it again. And he gives them a magnificent building, which eventually was then also destroyed, not by the Muslims. This is all the Roman time. The remnants of that reconstruction of the second temple. This is the second reconstruction. So there was the original, then that was destroyed, another one. Then that was destroyed, the second reconstruction. The second reconstruction, which is roughly the time of Jesus, after Jesus, as King Herod, a little bit before Jesus. This is King Herod's second reconstruction. That wall is the only wall that remains of the original second reconstruction. Does that make sense, right? So that's something of the past. Hence, they go and they wail at the wall as a loss of their, the izzah that they had and the structure that they had. They don't believe that wall itself was built by Suleiman. Everybody knows that. And if you go to Masjid al-Aqsa, of course, that wailing wall, by the way, that wailing wall is right in front of Masjid Qiblah. So on one side you have the Muslims, and on the other side you have the Yahud. It's really like mind-boggling, there's a space distance in that. The Masjid Qiblah is a little bit high, but it's that wall. It's that same wall. On the one side is Masjid Qibla. Soon as you exit Masjid Qibla, you cannot see it because they blocked it. But if you look over, you would see the people wailing at the bottom of that.
Which, according to me, is a fluke.
Yeah, I would say this.
Which is important because, Muslims are going to want to run with that, especially from a PR point of view. It's a nice kind of romantic idea to show this is the world's most religious spot. You've got the Jews here, you've got the Muslims here. That happened by random.
Yes, it did. Yeah, it's just developed on its own.
Yeah. And you said 4,000 years, yeah? So
the city.
Yeah. So what are you putting Sulaiman alayhi salam's any activity on Aqsa at, historically speaking?
Bro, that's a difficult question. We had this discussion before. Look, all recorded history seems to indicate around 900 BC. Right, around 900 BC. Ibrahim would be around 2500 BC. This is what recorded history, and it's tawatur, like small things, indicating, put together.
So the maqam of Ibrahim, for example, footsteps, that's a key issue for you. So, for example, the theory that it's hundreds of thousands of years old, is that utterly rejected as far as you're concerned?
Me personally, there's no evidence in our recorded history to suggest that.
And so, therefore, the footprints were.
By the way, there are no actual footprints. Those things that you see.
So this is exactly one of the questions here.
Huh?
So they want to hear the answer to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So guys, this is a common misconception. The Maqam Ibrahim is just a platform or a rock that Ibrahim alayhi salam would stand on, and he would then use to build the Kaaba. Okay, so the Maqam Ibrahim was simply a rock that was used, a rock that would have a place to pray on it. So it's not just a pillar, It's not just a pillar as it is now. In his time, it would have been a little bit bigger. Maybe some type of boulder that would have been spaced to do or sujood or whatever. So over time, obviously, it would have whittled down. It would have become some type of, just a pillar or something. And to protect it from the days of Jahiliyyah, they would cover it up. So when Islam came along, and of course the Quran mentions وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى, in some time in history, I forgot when, one of the Khulafa decided that as we protect the rock, let us put 2 footprints on the top so that people can understand that this is the Maqam Ibrahim. So those footprints were put. Every time the Maqam Ibrahim was constructed, so they say that the original rock is still over there. By the way, in the time of the Sahaba, in the time of the Prophet, that rock was connected to the Kaaba. It was right in front of the Kaaba. It was right in front of the gate of the Kaaba, the door of the Kaaba, between the door and between the Hijr. Okay, it was right there. Now, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala, he felt that that maqam was impeding the tawaf. So he said, I'm going to pick it up and move it to a reasonable distance so that even during Hajj time, everybody will have space to do tawaf around the Kaaba. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala did not think 1,500 years ahead that there would be 3 million people. He thought 10,000, 5,000, not even 10,000. And in his time, 10,000 would have been a large amount. And if you have 10,000 Hujjaj split over a day or two, between the maqam where it's currently standing and the Kaaba, there is 35 feet or something like that. So there would be enough for people to do tawaf, right? But subhanAllah, nowadays that has become an impediment, and it would actually be better for us to move it back to its original place, right? So that people then would have less time. But khair, qaddarallah ma sha'a fa'al, it happened. The point is, those footsteps are not taken from the rock underneath. Actually, the rock underneath has not been seen. As far as I know, there is no photograph of that rock, and I have researched to the best of my ability, as far as I know. And the rock has been covered for many, many decades, not centuries, but decades. And even when they reconstruct or redo it, they always cover within so that nobody can see. And the same is for the Kaaba. When they reconstruct the Kaaba, they don't do it in public eyes, because people might go berserk, lose their minds, right? So I'll tell you an anecdote. I have been in Mecca. I've been visiting the Haram since 1980 as a little child. Alhamdulillah, I've done more umrahs than I can count, literally, alhamdulillah. I got married in 1996, and I bought my wife when I was a student in Medina. For the first time I brought her, and I was really told her the first time you see the Kaaba, this, that, like really pumped. I was literally less than a month I've been married to her, right? So it's like honeymoon phase as well, and really pumping up. And I'm telling her, of course, everybody thinks of the black Kaaba, everything. We walk up and my jaw just drops. Why? 1996. I don't know if you went to the, 1996 was the last time that the Kaaba was rebuilt, stone by stone. So what had they done? They had taken large, plastic sheets, right? And covered the entire Kaaba with curtains and sheets. You couldn't see the Kaaba. It was such a disappointment to me. And obviously, I don't big deal, but you know how we as men, we want to make everything good. It was like such a disappointment to me. The first time I went for Umrah, she didn't see the Kaaba at all, because the Kaaba was being rebuilt from the 1930s or something, when King Abdulaziz had rebuilt it. As far as I remember, King Abdulaziz had rebuilt it. So since that time, 67 years had gone. Now they have rebuilt it, the most solid rebuilding ever done in the history. So they say it's going to last another 200 years, the way that they built it. But they literally built it stone by stone. And they did not want to show the people that they're taking the stone, breaking it and whatnot. So they cover the entire Kaaba. And then they, of course, break it and So guys, as you know, the stones are not sacred. It's the area that's sacred, right? Nothing original remains of the Kaaba other than...
Are you serious?
Yes, I am serious.
Nothing.
You know what happened? I was in Medina at the time. We heard of a group of Pakistanis. So because I'm Pakistani, I'm allowed to criticize my own people. And because you're Pakistani, we can get away with it, right? So some of the Pakistani construction workers were secretly taking those stones and selling them on the black market.
Sick. But that legal.
Okay, this is 1996 when they did that. And then the government found out, because obviously you can't, keep it secret. They're selling it for exorbitant prices. We have the original, because what the government had done is that they had taken these stones, destroyed them, and then discarded them in further regions outside of Mecca. So these guys, getting some money, what I'm saying, selling the original stone. So they were getting mini fortune by selling the stones in the Kaaba, thinking, and of course we're the group that's going to buy it. You know that, right? First in line is us, Pakistanis, man. We'll pay you anything for the original stone in the Kaaba because we're thinking it's sacred. The stones of the Kaaba are not sacred. Only one stone is, of course, we believe it to be the original, and that is the Hajar Aswad, the black stone. And of course, even that, by the way, sorry to burst your bubble, but should I say it or should I not? Huh? The reality is that 97% of it is not even the stone. Right? Blocked again.
Lost the video again.
Okay, bro.
Because you're killing our camera. That's why, man. Our battery's gone.
I think maybe this is a sign.
It is a sign.
So I shouldn't tell you the last bit.
So you didn't hear the last part, which would have broken all of your hearts. Allah jazakallah khair, Yasser. Barakallahu feek. I hope that you guys make dua for Sheikh Yasser. He's always welcome in helping. This is our program in Al-Maghrib. Jazakallah khair. They always put up everything, for this program. In fact, you've earned your. Honestly, they've got the lamest snacks. Check this out, man. What the heck is that? Honestly, so lame. All right, guys. So inshallah, back in Qiblah next week and lesson as per normal. And that's about it. I think we covered most of the questions, and to be honest, awesome lesson. طيب شاذ جزاكم الله خير سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك اللهم واتوب اليك والسلام عليكم ورحمه الله